Welcome to Zack Attack Reviews. Thank you for joining me for my review of Skinamarink, the new horror film that has taken 2023 by storm and is very, very divisive. It's directed by Kyle Edward Ball and is now streaming on Shudder. It was in theaters for a little while and actually made a lot of money, but I didn't get to check it out, so I'm happy that I got to check it out on Shudder and let you guys know my thoughts. Is it the masterpiece some critics say, or is it a disaster like some audience members say? I'm going to break down the good and I'm going to break down the bad and let you know what I think overall. Let's start with the premise. In Skinamarink, young siblings Kevin and Kaylee wake up in a dark house to find their parents gone and the doors and windows have vanished. They decide to go downstairs where they can watch cartoons. When menacing sounds come from around the house, toys and other objects start to disappear and other objects start to appear on the ceiling. Terrible things start to happen and they're left with a sinister force that apparently has the power to do anything. Let's start off with the good. So the movie starts with Kaylee's perspective as her little brother Kevin gets suddenly hurt. We're not too sure what happened, but her father scrambles to take him to the hospital. Once they return, that's where things start to get crazy and the dread starts to set in. Parents disappear, the windows and the exits out of the house start to fade, and the two kids are left alone to figure out what to do. This film is 90% atmosphere, which really is a creepy nightmare fuel, especially if you were a kid that was afraid of the dark, looking into dark corners and felt like you saw or heard something coming from there. Especially if you're a kid that, let's say you're 10, 11, or 12, and your parents left you at home and every noise that you heard creeps you out. This movie plays into all those fears perfectly. With the way the film is directed, edited, and the weird grainy cinematography is done, because this movie is set in the 90s, so it has that old grainy feel of like you looking through like a video camera, and everything is filmed from either the perspective of the kids or this sinister being that's watching them sometimes, which immediately ignited childhood fears that I used to have when I was a little kid. So, like I said, walking around in the house and you see in a dark corner, not too sure what's going on over there, hearing bumps inside the house, knowing that you shouldn't be hearing it because your parents are either asleep or out and you're the only one alone, turning around the corner and not knowing what's coming next, looking under the bed and expecting something to just grab you. All the things that are just a nightmare fuel for a little kid is brought to life here really, really well. From the grainy filming that I brought up before to the long shots, there's a lot of shots of just the wall, the floor, the toys that the people have, the light, and just those repeatedly in between segments of the kids trying to figure out what's going on and trying to find where their parents are and seeing weird things happening eventually. You know, they'll walk through the hall, they'll pass a certain wall a certain amount of times, and then something that's supposed to be there will suddenly disappear. And it's so sudden, and you're like, wait, well, hold on, what just happened? And you just start feeling slowly as the movie progresses, weirder and weirder things are happening, and everything is kind of hard to see, and as you can tell, it's hard to see for the kids as well. The audio is kind of done in a weird way where you can't 100% hear exactly what everything is being said. Thankfully, I watched this on Shudder, so I had subtitles, and the hearing what they said or reading and understanding what they said was important for me to keep me engaged, because then I understood why the kids were doing what they were doing or what they were hearing. With all those combination of things I just said, this is one of the most experimental horror films that I've seen in a long time, and I thought it was very, very effective. I was tense and scared for these kids the whole movie. With that said, though, because it's so experimental, I think people who like unique like indie films that are different, or who like horror films that take a different approach, this will definitely excite you, because it's very different from anything I ever seen. So we've been in a resurgence of horror films lately, but the things that have been great in the last couple of years, you can say, okay, I've seen this before, but this is just a really great version of it. I've never seen anything like Skinamarink before. And depending on your taste, that's going to be a great thing or a bad thing. Personally, I was mesmerized by this film with the way the film was directed. Even though I felt frustrated sometimes watching it, I couldn't stop looking because I wanted to figure out what was going on. Not everything is clearly like splayed out for you. There's a lot of theories going on what this movie actually means, but the knowing that these little kids were in trouble and just was trying to figure out what was going on as the movie progressed, as things got weirder and weirder and things started disappearing and you're realizing that these kids are stuck in a nightmare hell. It became one of the scariest movies I've seen in a long time, especially when the entity that has them trapped there started becoming a more clearer and clearer and clearer, and hints of what it is started to pop up in a very obscure way. You have to really pay attention. This is not a horror film that you can kind of just look away and look on your phone and then come back, because you're gonna miss something that you need to know to understand what is actually going on, because you're not given much in the first place. And lastly, there's a lot of theories about what's going on in this film and the themes and what it actually all means. For me, the personal theory that I have for what's going on in this film is that this is a metaphor for kids that are being abused and how they feel trapped inside the house of the parents that may be abusing them. And I think that that's what this film is about. It's not a huge spoiler. If you check out the film, you might interpret it in a different way, but that's just something the way I interpret it, from the way Kevin gets hurt, the little boy Kevin gets hurt, and then how he sees the entity, that the little obscure ways we get to see the entity, and everything that happens towards the end, and some of the hints of things that happen in the movie towards the end, especially with pictures of the family and things. I really think that this was a kids trapped in a nightmare hell with parents who are abusive, or with a father that's abusive and the mother is being abused as well. I think that if that is the case, this is a movie that hits really home to a lot of people who suffer things like that, especially as a small child, and just brings it into a horrific and experimental weird way. Now let's talk about the bad. So with the way, like I said, this movie is experimental because a lot of it is showing the cartoons the kids are playing, but there's a message within the cartoons if you're really paying attention. Showing the wall, showing the floor, showing the light, and long shots of this, and long repetitive shots too. Like they'll show it and then go on to something else, then something weird would happen, and then they'll show it again, and they keep going and going and doing that. And I feel like for a lot of viewers, this may become a bore and feel like a chore to watch because of this, because you're not going to be able to fully pay attention, because there's not a lot of clarity on what's actually going on. And that's why there's so many theories about what the movie is actually about. And a lot of the shots, especially towards the beginning, until certain things start happening, can feel like they're there for no reason. It's pointless. And the movie can feel like, especially if you don't sit through it, you're wasting your time, or if you don't really understand it, or if this is not the type of film that you're used to checking out. For me personally, I think that the biggest issue I had with the film was the pacing and the length. I think that the movie could easily have been 20 minutes less and executed the point the same way. Because after a certain while, it did kind of start going like, okay, I get what you're doing. I get what you're doing. You're building that tension. You're moving slow, and that was really, really effective. I was like covering my eyes, like, oh God, what's about to happen to these kids? A bunch of times, but there are times where they do certain things just last a little too long. They could have moved on just a little faster, just cut a little bit of the dread that they were trying to build. And I understand that this is a very inexpensive film. I think it was like $15,000 that the director spent to get this done. So it was very low budget. They didn't have much money to do things, and it wasn't something that was supposed to ramp up too much. But I wish that it ramped up just a bit towards the end, because it felt like it was a lot of build up, and the build up felt like at the same, like what we got felt like the same level as all the build up. It didn't go up and you're like, whoa, that was a crazy ending. It left it very ambiguous, which is fine. I'm okay with ambiguous endings, but I just wish that it kind of just ramped up just a bit and really nailed it. You didn't even need to tell me exactly what was going on, because I already have my theories, but just really nail that ending. So let's get into my verdict. This movie's the poster boy for it's not for everyone. Like, even though I enjoyed this movie and it was one of the scariest movies I've seen in a long time, and I really, really like it, it's hard for me to recommend this film. I don't know who I can recommend. I have to really know, like, if you're someone that's into film and want to see like non-blockbuster films, then I can definitely say, hey, check it out. But even for people like that, I see a lot of people who don't like this film, that watches a lot of indie and low budget films, don't like it. So it's really hard to recommend. All I can say is, if you have Shudder, or if you're a pirate, check it out. A late night on TV. Make sure there's subtitles and just be fully engaged in what's going on and follow and just pay attention to everything that's going on. And kind of like not only is it like a horror film where you're like, oh my God, I'm worried about these kids, but it also kind of feels like a mystery thriller where you're trying to catch the clues. There's a little bit of that in there, especially towards the end of the film. And just let the film take you on the journey. Just be prepared for like a lot of weird shots of just parts of the house, but it's for a reason. It's not done just to fill in time. There's a reason why he does it, but it can definitely feel boring if you don't if you don't know that going in. That said, I'm gonna give Skinamarink a B+. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What would you personally rate Skinamarink? Let me know in the comments below how you felt about the film, your theories if you saw the film, and if you have not seen the film and were on the cusp of seeing it or not too sure, let me know if my review pushed you towards that direction. Like the video if you like my review, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell to be notified of my reviews, reactions, ranking lists, and live discussions. And you can watch more of my content right now.